Welcome to my YouTube channel. As you can see, I've got 4 welders here. I've been doing steel welding for a while. I'm interested in getting into some aluminum welding. This is an Everlast machine here that I've got in a 253 DPI, and this is a Pro Pulse 220 MTS. Okay, so here's the tail end of the machine. Take a look. Looks like it has dual fins. It looks here like this unit is 220. Okay, let's take a quick look at the specification plate. This unit appears within MIG to have a 60% duty cycle at 250 amps, 100% duty cycle at 200 amps, and it appears to be the same duty cycle for MIG or stick. This unit appears to draw around at 45.5 amps. Okay, let's take a look at the back of the machine. This appears to have a actual solid switch versus a breaker style on-off. The cable appears to be about the same quality as far as strain relief, molded good. Now here's where we have a big difference. We have one fan, just one fan on the rear, gas inlet, and then here's the specifications. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so let's take a look at this specification sheet. So this unit appears to have 25% duty cycle at 200 amps, 60% duty cycle at 140 amps, and at 120 amps it's 100% duty cycle. It'll run continuously. Now bear in mind, these are all based on 100 to 105 degrees typically when these are tested, so if your shop is cooler, 50-60 degree workday, these numbers are going to be greater, obviously, so bear that in mind. So going down the specification sheet, the input voltage is 230 volts versus 240. Looks like the maximum draw from the wall is 40 amps, and it appears to be IP23S versus IP21S. So we'll get into those and the differences in them a little bit later on in the video. Also, if you'll notice, the machine is also made in Italy. I'm going to flip this breaker. This appears to be the on-off switch for the unit. Both the fans fired up. Turn the unit on. These fans appear to suck air and force through the unit. Blows air out here in the front and on this side unit. They do appear to run all the time. So even though this is a single fan design, it does appear to kind of be of an on-demand design. It's not running full RPMs. It's very quiet, not noticeably loud at all. Okay, so I've got the lid off. Let's take a look at this thing. So I'm looking at these boards. I do see some surface mount technology, which is good to see. That means it's fairly modern. I do, however, see a lot of what I would call 80s style technology. Some of this stuff, these MOSFETs, some of this winding, just the fit and finish. The boards do not appear to be coated. So here's the thing, guys. This is in a welding shop. I've never been in a welding shop where you didn't have grinders. You've got guys cutting, sawing, you've got dust. This stuff is everywhere. These 2 fans on the back are sucking this dust into this unit. So typically speaking, you would have these boards oriented completely opposite of how they are right now, because the dust that comes through this unit being blown in by these 2 fans is just going to settle on top of these boards. Now, if these boards are coated, or if I've even seen boards where they had a thin mylar cover that just draped across the top that allowed the board to somewhat breathe, yet any dust particles that came in literally just landed on top of the mylar. And when you peeled the mylar back, everything was fine. The board itself was still clean. The problem with all this stuff is you're going to have metal shavings, fine metal dust resting across all of these little resistors. Those are all little resistors, capacitors. These are your MOSFETs. These types of things do not like metal dust. This is going to short these things out. It's going to change the resistance. When you come down here and you look, you've got one fan blowing across this heat sink. That's it. This other fan blows across the top. So I'm looking at these fans a little bit closer, and it looks like, yeah, I'm pretty sure, only half the fan is actually blowing down the heat sink. Let's see. Yes, half the fan. So you got two fans, only half of the bottom fan is actually doing any cooling for you. Now, if these fans are synchronized and blowing air in, what do you have? You've got dust being blown across the heat sink from the bottom, and you've got dust being blown across the top as well that's going to settle down. There's a lot of locations in here for dust to settle and for components to short out, or for the dust to coat components. So any component, the life of the component is being cool. That's the whole reason for these two fans. Well, if you're blowing dust in this unit and you're coating these components with dust, you're basically trapping heat within the component. It can't cool itself, and it's going to run hotter, and that's going to shorten the life of the component. And so just kind of take a look and see what I'm talking about. So let's take a look at this breaker. This is just personal preference, but look at the style of this. This looks almost like an RV breaker or a house breaker. I'm not sure why this could have been a little bit different, why it wasn't just a switch and perhaps a breaker or a couple thermal fuses or some other breakers put in place. But this, I don't know. You make your mind up, take a look, but I think something different could have been done here. I don't like it. So I'm going through the unit, I'm seeing various locations. There's hot glue. Now some of that's necessary, I get it, but where are your standoffs? Where are your wire ties? Those types of things that are indicative of a quality machine, you're going to have standoffs. And I just don't see any of that in here, other than on the boards. The boards have standoffs. So I've taken the screws out of the Pro Pulse 220. Take the cover off. This unit has a ground clamp. A ground strap attached. I'm going to have to remove that. All right, I've got that removed. So let's take a look. So here's the one fan we talked about earlier. This fan appears to blow straight across the heat sinks. This cover obviously directs the forced air across the whole side of the board. Now remember, when we looked at the Everlast unit, the cards were stacked like this, horizontal. Notice how in this unit, the main board is vertical. And even though it only has one fan, the fan is directly aligned with the heat sinks and blows across them, and also has this shield. So this shield also would prevent the unit from ever grounding out against the cover. So that's a nice addition, just to make sure that nothing's going to short out while you're using the machine for whatever reason. Let's say you're welding and it gets bumped or something like that. there's no issue with anything coming in contact with the case and shorting out and frying the board. Come on down through here. We've got our transformer rectifiers. So look at the size of these capacitors, huge capacitors. Just a very clean design. Looking through here, very clean. This appears to be the encoder for the motor. So looking a little closer here, this logic board is, again, it's positioned in such a way that it's vertical. The wiring in the unit is exceptional. Everything's zip tied. The flat ribbon cable here, computer's top style, is just very much computer-esque. It's flat ribbon cables. Here's a nice touch. This is a ferrite cord. What this basically does is it shields any kind of high frequency RF noise or anything that might get on this cable from traveling into this logic board and causing any kind of errors or any kind of problems. And when you're talking about a 200 amp welding machine, 220 amp welding machine, and all this other electronics, it's very easy for any of these connectors or any of this wiring in here to become like an antenna and transmit noise into the logic boards. And when you see this additional step here, these ferrite cores like this, that's a big plus. That's going to prevent any kind of issues, especially when you're talking about the encoder here and all the information it's going to be sending into this board. This logic board is going to count on that information being correct. And any kind of issues with that are going to cause weld issues. That's where it's going to manifest itself. Okay, so we've got the plastic shield folded back. Let's take a look at this. So, if you just look at the boards and the components that are on the board, this is a totally different design looking. You don't see all of the resistors, the full-size, old-school, 80s style resistors. What you're seeing here is capacitors. You see surface mount. Everything's surface mounted as that can be. If you look closer, you can actually see the lacquer on the board. So when we were talking earlier about dust in the shop being sucked through, landing on horizontal boards, and just resting until the point that it creates a short circuit, you're not going to have this issue with these because the boards are being fully coated. So any dust or anything that does land is landing on top of that lacquer. It's not going to actually be able to short out any of the components on the board. And that's a big thing, especially with a welding machine. You're not talking about something that's going to live in a dust-free, clean environment or filtered environment. That's a big deal. And it's just a much simpler, cleaner design. Okay, so we've basically put this cover back on place. Let's talk about the switch right now. So this is a really nice quality switch. You can just tell by looking at it. It's heavy gauge wire, everything's screwed down, everything's crimped good and tight. Appears to be heavy gauge wire coming through here. This switch is just a much nicer all around. So just comparing size, these machines are, well, I like to say they're similar size, but they're really not. The Everlast machine's longer, taller, and wider, appears to be. And it's quite a bit heavier, lifting it up, set up on this platform. The HTP machine is very much lighter, but it still handles the 44-pound rolls, which is impressive for its size. It's almost like the thing was built around a 44-pound roll. Small as they could get it to make it still work.